I've been wondering about Devil Came Through Here trilogy even before it was a trilogy. I always found it fascinating, full of black cats, ravens, improvised weapons, scribbly black drawings, symbolic gore, nurses, accents, Stephen King references, oven accidents, and painfully satisfying smoking. Adventure horror game is something you don't really think about that much until you see it. We all kind of default to thinking of adventure games as kind of a little childish. These games are anything but. Okay, so this video is going to have some summaries of what was going on in the game, but I do suggest you play it. Each game takes anywhere from 4 to maybe 10 hours to complete. They are not that expensive, and if you like these kinds of psychological and horror indie games, you very well might enjoy it. But to be fair, keep the playthrough close, because it suffers from the classic shortcomings of adventure game and will drive you fucking mad. What do you mean I needed to put gloves in the toilet? What kind of fucking person? Of course, it's some Polish dudes. So many emotionally worthwhile games come from Eastern Europe in general, and Poland in particular. Is there something in the water? I don't know, I'm not European. So, Polish dudes, two brothers to be exact. I'm not going to be talking much about Michał Michalski, the musician and sound designer for Harvester Games, apart from saying how mind-blowingly good some of his works are. The soundtrack for The Cat Lady is one of my favorite soundtracks for everything ever made. The main person of interest, however, is Rem Michalski, the mastermind, the writer, the artist, the programmer of the games discussed today, and more. He is a kind of writer and developer that doesn't shy away from putting entirety of himself into his work. His life experience is bleeding all over the story. He lived in England, so the stories are set there, and the real world of the story is pretty much the world he lives in, or used to live in, at least. He seems to be following a pretty common piece of writing advice: write what you know. He worked as a nurse for a very long time, and 2 or 3 games take a pretty long and specific look at the profession. But when doing a little bit of surface level research for this script and reading interviews with Rem, I found that he doesn't really struggle as much with mental health as you might expect after experiencing his games. Apart from absolutely nightmarish work ethic and issues stemming from poverty and overall working class problems, he seems, well, alright. He claims to be a knowledgeable witness, seeing mental health struggles and depression over and over among people he knew, including in his work. And it really checks out. My phrase of choice to describe the game's point of view on depression is "I feel seen." But the overall thing of the trilogy, what is the whole thing is really about, what does it say to me, always seemed to elude me. I played The Cat Lady back when I was 19 and, well, depressed. And it really stuck with me on some kind of subconscious level. Not processed, but experienced. The whole trilogy seems to be walking a thin line between a reflective and deep masterpiece akin to Disco Elysium and hashtag deep, memeable, edgy posts from Tumblr and early social media days. Tasteless and gimmicky. Well, one of my favorite delusions these days is that I am a writer and a critic and a blogger and shit, so I thought I might as well give it my best and try to get to the bottom of it all. Perhaps this newfound urge has something to do with the fact that I am back to having ongoing, mental problems. Remission was fun when it lasted, what can I say? Anyway, let's talk about them games. I'm focusing on the Devil Came Through Here trilogy exclusively because I am severely technologically challenged and my top could barely run Lorelai. So playing Burnhouse Lane is out of the question, so I'm gonna pretend it doesn't exist. I'm going to start the quick summary section with the cat lady, as it is, as far as I know, the first in the chronological order of events. It follows Susan Ashworth, a depressed middle-aged woman who has lost a child a long time ago. She's pretty isolated and hangs out exclusively with cats. And before the story starts, she decides to kill herself and ends up not where she expected to end up. She meets a mysterious Queen of Maggots who forces immortality on her along with an unclear objective: kill a number of parasites. Susan kills her first one without leaving the hospital she got admitted to after her suicide attempt. The first parasite is the psychiatrist, Dr. Zalman, who turns out to be a serial killer. He kills her, but she comes back, and Dr. Zalman is no more. Susan eventually meets a young woman, Mitzi, that calls an ambulance for her, and they embark on a quest to find another parasite, and find plenty more as they try so. Vigilante justice and the company of Mitzi, who is almost the same age as her daughter would be and is dying from cancer, help Susan find some kind of motivation to keep on living. The big villain is a paralyzed man with a computer, doing damage not through old-fashioned killing and maiming, but through talking to people and driving them over the edge, like he did with Mitzi's boyfriend. So Downfall is interesting. It was originally the first game Michalski ever made, released back in 2009, but it has since become non-canon and has a remastered version, with quality on par with the Cat Lady and with plot tweaks tying it to the trilogy. However, playing the original 2009 game definitely gives some insights to the plot of the remaster, as the newer version explaining a few details still makes the whole thing more confusing. The story follows Joe Davis, who takes his wife, who is suffering from an eating disorder, to a lovely hotel vacation. At this point, I'm thinking 90% of the thing is happening in Joe's head, although I'm not sure. His wife, Ivy, gets kidnapped by an entity representing eating disorder, Sophie, and locked somewhere deep inside the hotel. So he has to kill 4 incarnations of Sophie to get his wife back. He gets some help from a resurrected corpse named Agnes, provided to him by Dr. Z, a psychiatrist. He's followed around from time to time by a not-so-mysterious axe killer. Of course, it's Joe himself. At some point, playing for Agnes, we meet Queen of Maggots, and she tells us that Joe is a bloodthirsty parasite. After killing Sophie, he finds Ivy dead, but attempts to resurrect her the same way Agnes was resurrected. He doesn't succeed. Instead, Susan busts him and, reasonably or not, decides he is a parasite and needs to be disposed of. Lorelai follows the titular character, a young girl living in a toxic household. Father long dead, burned out chain smoker mother, an innocent baby half-sister, and mommy's new husband, violent unemployed drunk with sexual harassment as a hobby. Lorelai comes back from her first day at work in a nursing home and attempts to just live her life. Her mother, however, has had enough of her own life and hangs herself in the bathroom. When Lorelai finally gets the bathroom door open, the parasite stepfather comes in and kills her. Lorelai ends up in an oddly familiar place. However, Queen of Maggots has taken a special liking to her. Lorelai gets to know her and her house better, and gets a similar deal as Susan. Come back to life, live to fight another day. Have some ethically sourced shark fin soup, and go! But when Lorelai comes back to life, she gets killed again, very quickly. As she goes back to Queen of Maggots' world, she meets a stranger who tells her the truth about the Queen and asks Lorelai to kill her, but she doesn't succeed. Instead, she's tasked with driving a somewhat random alcoholic back to drinking again. The decision is up to the player. In the end, our goal is to kill the evil stepfather and kill the Queen. She doesn't intend on letting Lorelai come back to life permanently. In the end, we blast the bitch with a Molotov. I hate doing summaries, but I know there has to be one in this kind of video because I have never closed the vid I want to watch and went to spend hours and hours playing a game to have the context needed. The plots of all three games are convoluted, with the severity of it depending on the game. The Cat Lady being the most comprehensible one, and Downfall requiring some intense processing before it even begins to make sense. So instead of jumping to what this is all about, let's start this with who. And the characters will help us shed some light on the overarching themes. And as it's often the case, the whole thing is about power in almost every single one. I used to like Susan quite a lot, but these days the appeal of a cynical middle-aged woman is lost on me. Her past, for the most part, is determined by the player and is of no consequence. The only thing that matters is her past marriage and her child. Susan's marriage was falling apart, and one unfortunate evening her infant daughter died from a flower-related accident and nobody noticed, and she and her husband were too busy arguing. They both spiraled after the event and her husband died, and then cats and depression. Depending on the player's choices, she can be a little nicer or a little meaner, but man, that woman is hard. She's somewhat relieved of her miserable side as the plot progresses, but her other traits stay the same. She's antisocial, an asshole to her neighbors, cranky, a habitual liar, and is suspiciously trigger-happy. I mean, her reaction to being killed for the first time was not as much as of horror or fear or anything else. She just jumps straight to determined revenge and murder. Not even like, I should capture him and hand him to the police. No, straight to bashing the guy's head in with a creepy-ass mace. The only other option we have is to leave the doctor to conduct his artistic endeavors in peace. By the time the second parasite comes by, despite still being very much depressed, she almost eagerly jumps to committing straight war crimes. And of course, there is a psyop against the neighbor that was complaining about the cats. Susan is a snarky one-liner queen, and frankly, she strikes me as a cool, depressed person kind of character, which I try to avert myself from enjoying these days. It doesn't seem too far-fetched to me that in one of the Downfall's endings, she is revealed to have become a parasite herself. It's hard to understand what Susan even wants and what motivates her. It's a pretty difficult thing to determine with suicidal people, you see. But I'll go on a limb here and say that ultimately she wants what most suicidal people want: change. The change she wants is, unfortunately, is in the past, and life can never go back to the way it was. And she knows this. Queen of Maggots calls Susan a good person, but I wouldn't be so quick to trust her judgment. It seems to me that Susan takes the point of view proposed by the entity very quickly and uncritically. There are parasites, and then there are people who don't deserve to suffer. Parasites poison the world, and killing them is making the world a better place. Change. Take the men who hurt you and watch them get eaten alive by cats. Hatred for evil seems to be one of her primary motivations. Revenge is not recovery. Getting back at the unfair destiny with vigilante justice is not recovery. The only reason her arc with a somewhat good and canon ending works is her projecting her maternal feelings on Mitzi and the fact that you cannot brutally murder cancer. But we will talk about endings later. I have mentioned Queen of Maggots before, and there is a whole chapter of this video that is devoted to her, so I will be brief here. The Queen is some sort of powerful supernatural entity with mysterious goals. She is powerful enough to bring people back from the dead, but she doesn't operate much in the real world, living in some sort of limbo between life and death. She has many names and seems quite ancient, but she is really ambiguous in the story. She seems to take interest in certain miserable humans, reaching out to them when they die and making deals with them to make them do her bidding. Unlike our protagonists, most of the people she reaches isn't lucky enough to get away relatively unscathed. In Lorelai, we get to see her true form, not the nice old lady with an unexplainable German-ish accent, but a giant lump of maggots and mannequin parts surrounded by a bizarre machine, endlessly devouring bodies somewhere within the world, behind the tunnel and behind the door in her house as well. Well, you know how nightmare spaces work, right? The plot of The Cat Lady revolves around parasites, and they seem to be one of the things Queen of Maggots is concerned about. They all seem to be pretty classic, genuinely bad guys, without any proper backstory to why they are the way they are, and with very little motivation apart from just being bad, deserving of no sympathy. Serial killers, abusers, rapists, cannibals, and whatever category Adam fits in, the perception of them is decidedly unambiguous. They deserve no mercy and must die. Even Susan, when tasked with killing the parasites, doesn't object to murder. She objects to being the one to do it. Not because it's a morally wrong thing for her, but because she thinks she's not strong enough. The parasites are vile as they are weirdly delightful. Dr. X is your classic intelligent psychotype, an artist, a thinker, a medical professional. The carpenter, one of the least developed parasites, has his charms too, just non-verbal torture of women, pretty mysterious, although honestly just a symptom of lousy writing and planning. Eye of Adam is your classic disabled villain, taking advantage of vulnerable people online and driving them to suicide, while harboring suicide tendencies of his own, excited to be confronted and possibly killed by Mitzi. And of course there are these two. Man, I bet they fuck nasty. Classic suburban family, your uncle and his wife from Facebook. The wife nagging, hysterical, jealous and violent, definitely abusing substances on a regular basis, yet still doing most of the chores in the house, and still the one in possession of the only brain cell in the household. The pest control man himself is an unfaithful and useless husband, a sexual predator, and a big lover of guns. And of course, they are both murderers and cannibals. John, Lorelai's stepfather, is an entire bingo card of terrible people. Domestic abuser? Check. Creep? Check. Alcoholic? Check. Drug dealer? Check. In Lorelai, it's heavily hinted that the parasites are also tools of the Queen of Maggots, her creations and her soldiers. Yet, why does she tell Susan to kill them? All three games are set not entirely in real world. The characters occasionally die or just slip into some other plane of existence. Silent Hillish world of machines, flesh, blood, dream logic and ghosts. Yet the parasites seem to stand firmly in the real world. No matter how bizarre and unreal they seem, they don't seem to set foot in any of the other worlds and don't seem to be aware that they even exist. They also seem unshocked by the queen's and her pet's antics, not noticing their victims die and come back to life, and on certain occasions, multiple times. Well, apart from Joe Davis, he is a special parasite. It's kind of hard to separate Joe and Ivy into two different characters, as we don't really see Ivy outside Joe's perception of her. At times it feels like Ivy doesn't exist at all. She is just one of the delusions that Joe has. They are a couple, married for quite some time. It's never really clear why and how they ended up together. In the beginning of the remake you can find a few reasons why Joe loves Ivy, but they all seem hollow somehow. None of them look right to me, at least, but I am no expert at what makes people stay together forever and such. It's not even clear if Joe loves Ivy at all. He seems to be in love with something, but I'm not sure it's Ivy. More like an image of her that he came up with. I think he's just infatuated with the idea of having a wife he loves. Out of all three protagonists, Joe is clearly the worst person and the most profoundly mentally ill one. As I scraped around for sources and details I might have missed, I've seen plenty of people speculating on the nature of his mental illness. One of these theories I want to acknowledge and discard, and one I will accept. So the one I'd prefer to be discarded is that Joe has dissociative identity disorder. First of all, crazy DID person with a murderous alter ego is a trope so nauseatingly overused I never want to see it ever again. Second, it's more of a mundane explanation and doesn't really do anything for the story. The other diagnosis for him, however, I accept: schizophrenia. I'm trying really hard not to be ableist in this video, as people with less socially accepted mental disorders are still people and suffer not only from their condition but from social prejudice formed in people by horrible media portrayals. Still, I think the delusions and hallucinations typically associated with schizophrenia lend themselves well here. See, my personal theory is that Joe isn't inherently a true parasite, or a murderer, or an abuser. But at some point, long time ago, perhaps when his brother was killed in an accident, he was touched and chosen by the Queen of Maggots and gained the same ability Susan and Lorelai did when they made deals with her, to conjure a nightmarish world and bring things back from it. Problem is, the things that come from within that world and what that world looks like depend on the person. So Joe was left with this ability and probably no knowledge of it. And his mind is able of conjuring so many things. His connection to the other world is strong enough to drag other people into it, as seen it when Susan enters it a few times, in the remake and in her own story. The Quiet Haven Hotel is just a mind palace of some kind, where things his mind spits out stay in perpetuity. The only thing that Joe wants is opposite from Susan's. He wants stability, he wants to go back, he wants his wife to revert back to the woman he fell in love with, he wants the monsters gone, his happy marriage back, he wants to be in control of things and stop them from happening. Some entities at the hotel explicitly state that they come from Joe's mind, his perfect woman, his shred of sanity. Some seem like ghosts of someone unrelated, I think, but Sophie and Harrison is just what Joe is afraid he and Ivy will become. It's not as prominent in the remake as it was in the original, but Joe is a cat killer. In the remake, he ambiguously burns the hotel's cat, but in the original it's much more gruesome, as the player themselves combines the cat and the knife in Joe's inventory to extract a key a cat has eaten. There is no other way. In the flashback in the original game, we find out he drowned Ivy's cat. His excuse for it seems implausible. Eating needles is nightmare logic, horror movie logic, otherworld logic. It's not truly a thing that happens a lot or with such flair as in real life. Was it another instance of the otherworld bleeding into reality? The Axeman killer wearing Joe's face is just another thing he separated from himself and let loose in the hotel. His potential for violence he's so afraid of. I know I could drown a cat if I needed to. I could chop a live chicken's head off like my ancestors did. My hands are no different from the hands of mothers strangling their unwanted babies in the crib. Every human has the potential for violence, and common sense, morals, and personal choice is the wall between us and that potential. I am not particularly scared of mine, but if my nightmares, the projections of my pain and anxiety, started jumping out from the walls of my apartment, I would be. It's not paranoia if you're really being watched and all. Joe's descent into being a parasite seems justified to me. Ivy's tortured existence and possibly death seem like a horrible accident. It's just what Queen of Maggots does, I think. The biggest difference between Lorelai and other protagonists is that she is very young. like became a legal adult yesterday level of young. Susan is 40, Joe is 30 something, and Lorelai is 18 and not that mentally ill compared to the rest of the characters. Discarding obviously not real Agnes, she might be the most sane person in the trilogy. She never loses grip, the sight of her goals or determination. She's a colorful contrast necessary to the overarching story, a foil to jaded, cynical and somewhat deranged protagonists of the previous games. She's not going to become them. It's a good note to finish the trilogy on. She won't succumb to Queen of Maggots' schemes. In fact, she will torch the bitch, no hesitation. Susan could never. She might have her quarrels with the Queen, but in the end she makes sense for Susan. She's the one who's got her. Jo's barely aware of her presence, and Lorelai has zoomer energy. Her confrontations with the Queen remind me less of a villain-hero dynamics and more of me looking at my grandmother as she says the most bizarre shit possible and going like, okay, old lady. Lorelai brings a degree of self-awareness to the trilogy. Without her actually sober view, it would be too unbearably edgy. She grounds the world of Devil Came Through Here. She still cares about her good-for-nothing mother, but doesn't break under her unhealthy influence. She loves her half-sister, but not as much as to become obsessed with her like Jo would. She hates her stepdad and very much is willing to kill him, but she doesn't jump to it like Susan did. She forms a somewhat healthy, reasonable relationship with her neighbor. She's a better person from the girls from her work, although she has that many more reasons to be mean and bitter. To be fair, it's strange that Queen of Maggots saw her as her successor. Perhaps the old woman couldn't conceive that people can just not be broken after life hits them, even if it's hard enough, even if it's for long enough. Or maybe that's exactly why she likes her. I feel like one of the underlying things with Michalski's work is that it doesn't take someone special to be friends with depressed people. No one treats the characters like they are pieces of glass that is about to shatter. They just get treated like people. I feel like it's one of the easiest takeaways of the trilogy is that it doesn't take a miracle or a magician to make things better. A neighbor, a stranger, with at least a touch of kindness and willingness to listen make all the difference we need. And sometimes we are that stranger. Sometimes it's the relationship you have with yourself. Elle, secondary character from Lorelai, a recovering alcoholic, illustrates that point well. Lorelai whispers a kind word in his ear and he's willing to try again. Hearing someone share their story at an AA meeting helps him keep going. A chat about cats with Susan helps him stay distracted from drinking. There is no grand gesture or forgiveness from his ex-fiancée. But the good news is, it's not necessary. It's all in the little things. And the little things can bring him down too. Little things matter, and it's the same old thing, everyone's sick of it, but everyone knows it already. Be nice to people. It might make a bigger difference than you will ever know. Although most of the characters, if not all of them, are lonely, they are rarely truly alone. We all rarely are. Unless you put a ton of effort in avoiding people, you still see your neighbors, a cashier in a nearby shop, a random drunk that strikes up a conversation, a doctor, a co-worker, a tired maintenance man. Sometimes these people you might never see again give you a gift of thought you will keep forever. Well, unless you are Jo or Ivy, that are both too far gone to have any takeaways from human contact. They are both stuck in the big thing, and the big thing matters too. Jo and Ivy are each other's downward spiral. Her condition makes him more erratic, wishing to save her, help her, shield her, which triggers a downpour of insanity from him, his fears whispering it to her from the mirrors, his concern a self-fulfilling prophecy. Joe and Ivy are the most alone characters, having nobody but each other, and Joe's ghosts in the hotel of his deranged mind. I've seen it happen. Two people becoming one in a metaphysical embrace of issues. Some people should really never talk to each other for their own good, let alone get together. Sometimes you are kindred souls, able to relate to each other better than anyone else, but sometimes you can and will make each other worse. Lorelai and her family don't click in the same way Joe and Ivy do. Sure, her family is toxic and traumatizing and dysfunctional, but as long as she's trying to escape from them and not into it, she will never let it consume her. Susan's friendship with Mitzi is also somewhat dysfunctional. A lot of it is both of them searching for motivation other than vengeance. They find what they're missing in each other for a short while: a parent, a child. Found family is huge for social outcasts. For some, it's their everything. Unlike Joe and Ivy, they make each other better. Not by trying to save one another, but just saying, hey, I care about you. All of you. Zach and Lorelai, it's even better. If you need me, I'll do my best to help you get where you need to go. Because it's a sensible thing that people have been doing for each other for as long as there's been people. I will sacrifice something important for me, not because I want something back, but because people sacrifice for the sake of others all the time. And being mad about it defeats the purpose of it. Help not out of search for purpose or strive for control, but just out of innate desire to help a human in need. The thing though is that Lorelai is not as down bad as the others. I don't think that the umbrella, the beanie and the lighter trick would work on Susan, or even worse on a rambling mess that is Joe Davis. I can't help but leave with a conclusion that when you fucked up enough, a normal human relationship is out of the question. You have to start with dysfunctional, strange, crazy, bizarre ones to hopefully someday level up to something at least resembling normal. And some people might never graduate from online friends they will never see, online communities, fictional characters, parasocial relationships, and flings that result in a broken heart. And it's unfair, and it makes me angry, but it's true. It's unfair and it makes me angry, but it's true. Perfect opening line on one of the biggest topics in the game. What makes life worth living? And the answer is nothing in particular. Not a single plot point, not a single ending in all three games has a miracle solution, a magic pill, a revelation of the century that makes everything make sense and life worth living. Meaning of life is one of those optical illusion photos. Once you look into it and stop seeing what you originally saw, it gets hard to switch back. As someone who struggled with mental health conditions since literally 12 years old, at some point mental illness becomes cancer. When you recover, you are not cured, you're in remission, and your chances of getting your illness back are not as slim as you would have liked. Reb Michalski knows this. It's written all over. The biggest thing is hopeful disappointment. Every ending in Lorelai and the Cat Lady, even in Downfall, is emerging from the other side confused. Looking at where you ended up and saying, is this what I fought for? Is this what I went through hell for? For everything to be maybe marginally better or just definitively worse? For me to stand in line at the grocery store and tired and cranky, and for my friend to eventually die. And then saying, yeah, this is what it was for, I guess. The fighting will continue, and I will have to claw and bite and kick for an ability to eat a cup of instant ramen on my balcony on a sunny afternoon in May. It's pretty obvious that Queen of Maggots isn't going anywhere. The parasites roam the earth, but at least we have won a battle. Perhaps for Lorelai, in a few years or decades, going down to the nightmare world and setting Queen of Maggots on fire with flammable liquids will become a routine akin to spring cleaning. That's just what mental illness is like, I think. Sometimes we keep living for cats out of spite, for revenge, out of stubbornness, to have a cup of coffee again. The thing that matters is that we keep living, and getting disillusioned about why we do it, paradoxically, makes it easier. There is no big end game, there is no grand conclusion, no greater purpose. The third theme that I keep seeing in this game might be a little controversial. That psychiatrists kinda suck. I want to put like a disclaimer here: if you are suffering from a mental health problem, this is not your sign to give up on getting professional help and just rotting quietly or loudly until the day you die. Get help, they can be useful, both the people and the meds. God, I love the meds sometimes. But fucking shrinks, honestly. Like, the acceptance effort for mental health problems kinda led us to a weird place where people are trying to convince themselves that having a psychiatric illness is just like having something like hemorrhoids. Sure, some people might not want to hear you talk about it, but in the end it's a common problem that can cause a lot of discomfort. But with some help from a special doctor and a good diet and sitting on the toilet just right, you will get it resolved. Bullshit, I say. The first psychiatrist, Dr. Z, who was apparently a Nazi for no reason in the original Downfall, is, well, technically capable of the dissection of the mind. The problem is that his love to shuffle brains around can be as harmful as it is helpful. He takes a brain, shoves it into a body, electrocutes the shit out of it, and then we'll see what happens. Here's a chemical to kill a memory. My job here is done. Granted, he provides tools and ideas from time to time, but in the end he's just another bloodied figure in Joe's head. I've had psychiatrists like that. Xavier Zellman is just a straight-up parasite. In it for the power, making art with people, using them as canvas, disregarding that they are people. He might have a ton of diplomas on the wall and this soft, welcoming voice, and when you've been through a lot, you really want to trust this kind of guy that says reassuringly that you can be fixed in no time. But more often than not, you can't be fixed. Not really. I know plenty of people, me included, who will stay fucked in the head forever. You can't dissect and medicate and electrocute the insane and cruel and unjust world. The ones that truly believe that they can fix you entirely might just be egomaniacs looking for a canvas. I've been to many psychologists, therapists, psychiatrists. I've been hurt and disrespected and actively made worse by some of them, feeling betrayed and bitter. I've also had some of them just surrender. I've been told several times they don't know what else to do for me, apart from handing me a prescription. Here is a chemical to kill a memory. I don't want to throw shade at the entire field of mental health professionals. They are out there every day pulling people off the edge. God knows I wouldn't have been here to talk shit online if it wasn't for them. But in the end, it's just not good enough. They can't unbreak what has been broken by basic realities of life. They are stuck bouncing between the real world and the nightmare world like the rest of us. Sometimes they are only better because they have a circular saw to open skulls and you don't. And sometimes they are a part of the world that breaks you. So let's talk endings now. The endings are all bad, even the good ones, so let's start with them. My favorite one, and by favorite I mean full of cruel but on point irony, is a secret golden ending of The Cat Lady. See, there is a way to not only get all of the good stuff of the canon ending, but also prevent Mitzi dying from cancer. She has terminal late-stage brain cancer, and then she just magically gets better. Do you know that this ending is impossible to achieve on the first run? Most of the conditions are possible to hit on the first run, but the sequence in her home has to be done perfectly. The sequence is simple. You return home from the hospital and need to take care of yourself and go to bed. Here's a mental breakdown meter. It goes up when you look at things, or when you use the wrong item, or when you do literally whatever. You have to know what to do, step by step, or you're getting that mental breakdown, which locks you out of magically curing Mitzi's cancer. It's metagame all throughout. People like perfect endings, even if they don't really work in the story. And to get a perfect ending, you need to do some metagaming. But there isn't any metagaming in the real world, and there are no perfect endings either. Don't punish yourself for not getting a golden ending in real life, is what I'm saying. In every ending, Susan gets better too. Having a blog about fighting depression online. She's still bitter about the world, but thinks there are people who are alright. She moves on from Mitzi's death, be it from cancer or one of her two possible ends in the last Parasite's home. It's kind of underwhelming. She saw her own dead body, met possibly the devil, became immortal, possibly told said devil to go fuck herself, fought serial killers and cannibals and stuff, and now she has a blog. Still depressed, waiting for the relapse to steamroll her into the ground again, but somewhat willing to get up after that inevitably happens. Mundane reasons to live. Lorelai also just keeps on living. Bethany or no Bethany, Zach or no Zach. Nothing is entirely fixed, it's just better. Joe, of course, is always the outlier. His golden ending brings his wife back from the dead. In the end, they hold hands with their building burning in the background. The dysfunctional marriage continues. The normal ending is Ivy dead, Joe on the run, and still the madman. The worst ending is just Susan killing him and being revealed to be a parasite herself. Shit is bad. That's doubtful for you. Some people are just fucked beyond repair. Not you, probably, but you might know one. Let's talk about Queen of Maggots. Still, after all that playing and replaying and reflecting, I'm still not sure what she is supposed to be. Perhaps that's the idea. She might be the devil in his loose interpretation, handing out well-deserved punishment for mankind's wars with one hand and torturing innocent souls with another. She might be death, bound to take us all, ever present, always waiting, possible to fend off for a while, but never forever. She might be depression and mental illness personified, with Susan and Lorelai for a very long time. Sometimes an old friend, but mostly a manipulative enemy. She might be some sort of manifestation of all evil in the world, never to be eradicated as long as there are people, consuming and consuming. Perhaps she's a ghost of a woman long dead, lingering in between life and death for the sake of a goal we will never learn. All of these interpretations have in-game basis, but here is mine. She is all that and more. Maggots, you see, are interesting things. Kind of hard to define, it's not a scientific term. You know, the wiggly things, on dead things. Sometimes on living things as well, which is really disgusting. Maggots make me nauseous, honestly, but they are a part of the world. Sometimes something has to eat the dead stuff, and maggots are among the things that do so. They are alive. They become something else, but one way or another, they are one of the ways dead stuff becomes alive stuff again, through food and carbon cycling. That's Queen of Maggots. I think she's just life. I know, it sounds grim and gnarly, but I think that's what life truly is. There is gripping beauty in her portrayal sometimes. An old woman, sophisticated, surrounded by art and nature, welcoming, somewhat caring. Yet she creates monsters that hurt us, but destroys them as well. She brings us into the world and takes us away. She is Susan's depression, but she is her reason to go on. Life is not meant to be fully understood, I think. The more you look at it, the more confusing and multifaceted it becomes. You think yourself into a corner like every philosopher does and have to start narrowing shit down and defining the undefinable. You can't perceive the thing in its entirety and depict it accurately, yada yada, planet Earth, fourth dimension, quantum physics. Queen of Maggots is just life. And life is 90% standing in lines, washing dishes, wiping your ass, and making marginal changes. It's also made of gross stuff and whirling flesh, and we're surrounded with these funny machines that we make. It's also beautiful in its twisted way and keeps us going long after we can't do it anymore. My favorite quote from the game, by the way, here, have it.
I want you to understand that you can keep going long after you count.
Can't believe I wrote almost a 7,000 word script, and the conclusion is basically, it is what it is. But it is what it is. That's life. There is no conclusion, not really. But thinking about Devil Came Through Here trilogy got me a few insights into games and myself. And those are my two favorite kinds of insights. I fought like hell with the writing, playing, recording, filming, editing, but the ending will be underwhelming. And I don't think I will fundamentally change that much. All of it is so symbolic and shit. I think I need a snack. See you when I see you.